So the third example are, what are some of the ways you can detect subclinical cases? Number one, antibody detection. Now, once the test for HIV once the test for antibodies to the AIDS virus was discovered, basically was discovered, at that point, then we could go back and see which individuals had antibodies to the AIDS virus. And a lot of individuals didn't even know, for instance, that they were carrying the AIDS virus, and the only way they knew was actually by getting a positive AIDS test. So especially, I was telling you about that window of infection. So with the AIDS virus, right, you need at least 6 months, right, for antibodies to appear. So if you get an AIDS test somewhere in here, if it's negative, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're HIV negative. So what they recommend is you get the first test, and then you wait for 6 months, and then you get the second one. And if the second one's negative, then you have a much greater chance of being negative. So the number one way really is antibody detection. But, in the case of Typhoid Mary, she didn't have antibodies to typhoid. Right? She didn't have any antibodies. And so in that case, what they did was they just kept seeing that every house she ended up going to, the individuals came down with this infection, right, with typhoid fever. And then they were able to finally conclude that indeed Typhoid Mary was the cause. And in that case, they deduced that information by evidence. But another way, if possible, you can directly identify the pathogen, but that's very expensive, and it's very difficult. It can be very difficult. A lot of times you really need to know what you're looking for. It's very challenging to just, go blind and try and find something, right? Usually you need panels and various things to test your serum or blood against these known panels. And, certainly it's better to start when you at least have your antibodies. So that concludes our lecture about the human host and disease transmission. Thank you so very much for visiting Educator.com.